welcome back to Prime Time. Our topic of discussion for this week is that making trade conditional on environment and human rights is not just colonialist, it is also inefficient. Recently, I've conducted interviews with 3 experts in this field. We have Camille Leonards, our political theorist, we have Sophia Niels, our economist, and finally, we have Katharina Ecclesia, a WTO trade lawyer. Let's find out what they had to say. Good evening, Camille.
Hi, good evening.
And can you tell us how making trade conditional on the environment and human rights, how is that colonialist?
Yeah, of course. Well, let me first clarify a bit with what colonialism entails as a concept. So it is not just linked to territorial domination. It's also a structure of domination in which one actor claims the authority to define the norms, institutions, and developmental pathways of another. And this has historically been asserted by the global north to the global south. And this is exactly what happens when the EU uses its structural economic power to impose environmental and human rights conditions on trade. Even when this conditionality is framed as being sustainable, modernizing, or responsible governance, the underlying structure is one in which the norms and rules are made in Europe and applied elsewhere.
Can you give us some examples of where that might be happening today?
Yeah, of course. So this becomes particularly visible in the way the EU is increasingly relying on PPM. These rules reflect European priorities when it comes to sustainability standards, technical requirements, and monitoring standards, yet producers in the global south have to fully restructure their entire production around them without having any say in it. And this is colonial domination because it produces a historical pattern in which the global north dictates the terms of production and governance. And further, another example, for example, is the CBAM that is now being introduced. It fully relies on giving one carbon price to all exporters without taking historical emissions and capacity into account. And this dynamic reflects the logic of, oh sorry, I messed up, wait, I'm gonna start the argument again. Another example where you, for example, can see this is CBAM that is now being introduced. It applies the same carbon price to all exporters regardless of historical emissions and capacity. It thereby forces developing countries to bear disproportionate costs simply to maintain access to European markets. And this dynamic is directly reflected by climate colonialism. The countries least responsible for climate change are required to burn its cost, while those most responsible not only avoid it, but also retain control over the rules, resources, and global climate agenda. And finally, another point to be made is that EU's trade conditionality casts the global south not as an equal business partner, but as an object to be monitored and surveyed by the global north. The EU positions itself as a global authority that decides what counts as sustainable or rights respecting, thereby reproducing the very asymmetries of knowledge and power that used to dictate earlier colonial rule.
Brilliant. Thank you for being with us this evening, Camille.
Yeah, no worries.
Sophia, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And in your opinion, do you think that making trade conditional on the environment and human rights, is it inefficient?
Well, in my opinion, I do believe it is, quite frankly, very inefficient. For example, it can create very hidden trade barriers, and these can in turn distort competition and also limit free trade, which are key pillars in our liberal market societies. And secondly, to define and meet these standards, they impose very high administrative, auditing, and transactional costs that can in turn lead to inefficient supply chains and higher prices, and this as well can hinder competition. So enforcing and measuring compliance, it is very difficult, and in these cases, almost impossible.
And would there be any risks associated with this?
Well, I would say, for example, for low-income countries, it is disproportionately harder to adapt to these standards, for example, because of lack of resources, and also, as another example, banning child labor. It is a very important issue that needs to be discussed, but it also has to be done properly because banning it might lead to children finding other unregulated or even more dangerous jobs, with which in turn can hinder their lives, but also economically speaking, supply chains, efficiencies. So in short, it is very inefficient.
Interesting take. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Katharina, thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And do you think, in your opinion, that making trade conditional on the environment and human rights, do you think it's colonialist? Do you think it's inefficient? What's your take on this?
I think that in the present situation is the most efficient way to bring all over the world human rights protection and environmental protection in the present economic situation, mainly because of two reasons. First of all, the WTO enabling clause allow for differentiation for developing countries. So it's not true that all the standards will be imposed in the same way to all the countries. To those countries that are considered to be developing and are more in need, there could be a differential treatment, so they're not bound by the same obligations than developed countries that have the resources to fulfill them. And additionally, it was said by the appellate body in the US shrimp case that there can be further differentiation, and there could be standards tailored to different countries based on their geographical differences. So countries that are more in need are able to obtain a tailored treatment for their needs, for their economic situation. So it is possible to further differentiate between them. An example is CBAM, that right now do not consider these possibilities, but when it will, because it's a necessity, it will be able for them to not breach WTO and apply differential treatment.
And what likely changes should we see, or will we see, as a result of CBAM being implemented?
In my opinion, since the EU is part of many international treaties where the CBDR principle is recognized, it will keep recognizing it in its actions, global, when speaking about global economy, and doing so, it will further the technology and knowledge sharing with those countries that are in need, as it recognizes that different countries have different capabilities. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for your take on this matter.
Thank you.
And there you have it, folks. 3 expert opinions on this week's hot topic. And for the viewers at home, what do you think? Do you think making trade conditional is inefficient? Do you think it's colonialist? Let me know what you think. I'm your host, Joanne Riley, and until next time.